Listen Stokely, where we try to be involved, to listen and learn for us all to evolve. So welcome to you and welcome the world. We hope you enjoy the stories to be told.
Welcome to Stokely, a podcast where we explore environmental conservation, our human mindset and adventure. Each week we invite you into conversation with people from all walks of life, people who truly inspire us and set about contributing to a greater place for us all to call home. So please take some time to settle in for our conversation today with our host, Maya.
Hi everyone and welcome to the Stokely podcast. My name is Maya Backhausen and we are on a mission to maintain the art of conversation, holding space to converse and share stories on adventure, mindset and the natural world. I really hope you're as motivated and inspired coming out of these conversations as I am, and I hope it leads you to start, sit or listen in conversation. On this episode, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Beau Miles, who needs little introduction if you've spotted any one of his offbeat stories of adventure on YouTube. Stories which exemplify a curious view of the human condition. So, Beau believes wholeheartedly that we're all weird. He holds a PhD in outdoor education, he's a father, and he's a funny, authentic and insightful guy. And lucky for me, Beau has just released his book, which is titled The Backyard Adventurer: Meaningful and Pointless Expeditions, Self-Experiments and the Value of Other People's Junk, which has set a perfect foundation for our chat as we are both currently in lockdown. So, now I'd like to invite you in acknowledging the traditional custodians upon the lands where this podcast is created and listened to, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. So, thank you good people for your time and energy today. Now let's get into it. G'day Beau, how you going?
Hi, Madge.
How are you?
Really good. I'm bearded. I've got double down on, so I've got a down vest underneath a down puffer sitting in a shed out the back of my business partner's house.
Beautiful, mate. We've not had the smoothest of transitions from pre-podcast chat to podcast chat, mate. You sound a bit. We need to even out those airways, mate. So, are you doing good?
Yeah, doing really good. We're both in lockdown in different sides of the bay right now, but I assume you've got the lovely balmy 12 degrees over there too. I like winter. I like the depths of winter. Double downing.
It's crisp, isn't it? It's such a fresh, crisp time of year. It kind of really makes you feel alive if you're outside. Like, oh yeah, that's right.
Kind of running. Yeah, yes. I love winter running. We're kicking butt, mate. Really good. Happy to be here and happy to be in winter.
Mate, it's pretty funny actually, hey, because we are both in lockdown. I don't know what day we're on at the moment, but over here in the Melbourne region, which seems to be the whole length of Australia sometimes. I don't know where Melbourne starts and where Melbourne finishes really, but I find myself incredibly lucky to be able to sit with you, the backyard adventurer, and on a podcast right now getting my own personal advice on what to do in my own backyard during lockdown. It's very timely.
Well, you don't need to. I'd be telling you to suck eggs, Madge. You're a runner, and you are. You find your zen when you bugger off out of a building. And if the government's given you a couple of hours, I reckon you'll use every second of that. No, I don't need to tell you how to be a backyard adventurer. I think a bloke with the amount of kilometres in your legs, you're an expert, man. That's all it is. It's just get outside, do whatever the hell you can do, and just get outside.
I love how you've challenged the status quo on that thinking so often, you know, and it's like, oh, but Beau, how do you do such an epic adventure? And it's like you just kind of do it.
Well, I'm really cautious of that word epic too, right? And so when people say that I've done this epic walk to work or paddled to work or slept in a gum tree, I'd be the last person to call them epic. I think they're stunts. I think they're meaningful stunts and they have great meaning. But, you know, comparing to like a Shackleton paddling a small boat across these wild 50-degree South Seas to get to South Georgia, or you know, scaling Everest without oxygen in a tweed jacket. they're sort of feats, and look, they're just sort of wealthy white bloke feats, but think of all the stuff that's happened in the past that is just unfathomable to our sort of current ways of thinking. I always have to bring myself back to that because, I always come home to a hot cup of tea and money in the bank and a pair of moccasins, and life is very easy very quickly as soon as I decide to stop whatever I'm doing. And you can't really say that for true epics, I think.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I think I've heard you speak to this before when like, let's paint the picture that a sponsored athlete is out there doing a traverse of a certain landscape, and that they spend a bit of time complaining about it and like saying how tough it is and stuff like that. And it's just like, hey, but you put yourself in this situation and you've got this incredible support to do it, and you want to use this time to like complain about it in a way. And I don't know why that doesn't gel really.
No, well, you're an optimist at heart too, and I think when you start to complain out there on a choice-driven endeavor, you're kind of digging your own hole a bit too, and you're losing audience as you do it because they're probably, whoever's watching you do these things are quite inspired by your choice to be there in the first place. And then little by little, the more you complain, the more you're going to lose that audience through inspiration because you're grizzling about it and it just doesn't make any sense. People think, well, why are you complaining about this when you made the choice to be there? And what they're not often doing in that time and place is not thinking about real problems of other people. That classic, it's cliches or heck now, people say it all the time. That's a third world problem. Oh no, a first world problem. Sorry. It's a first world problem and you should be thinking third world or whatever. I don't know, mate. They lose me pretty quickly, those sort of stories when someone's having a moan out there because, go home and sit in front of the fire if you're really having a bad day.
Yeah. I love that. I love the subtitle of your book. It uses the word meaningful and then at the same time it uses the word pointless. And I just like...
Yeah, well, that was a really hard, it's called a strapline, Madge, and that took months to come up with because I wanted to be really provocative with the title and strapline, and all sorts of cool ideas I thought were cool ideas got totally scrapped by the publisher. They were really good to work with, and they said, ultimately, Beau, it's your book. You can call it what you like, but, this is our advice on things. And I wanted to come up with a bad thing before or a pessimistic thing before an optimistic one for the strapline. And they said, no, start with the positivity before you start to flip it on its head and do this counterpunch type thing of meaningless and pointless. I still think in many respects walking to work is pointless before meaningful because the meaning hasn't come yet. You're expecting it to be meaningful by setting off, and often these trips aren't as meaningful as you think they are. But I get it from a publishing perspective or a marketing angle that, be positive first and then pull it apart as being pointless.
It's coming back to the epic side of using the word epic. I remember listening to a conversation you were having where you spoke about your first, I think it was your first trip overseas when you were 19. Did you go over to Nepal?
Yeah, I did. That was my first solo trip. I'd done a junket through Southeast Asia with a friend, and I'd been on a study tour as a 17-year-old. I was really lucky to travel in my late teens. But 19, I went to India and Nepal and scared the hell out of myself and did some solo time for the first time and realized just how big and intimidating the world was. The Himalaya, really. Yeah, that was then.
Did that escalate anything for you in terms of becoming the person you are now or the person you were back then?
It's always hard, Madge, to talk about my 20-year-old in a monologue. I have a hard enough time thinking of what I was like when I was 25 or 30, which feels really close in time-wise, but far away in terms of what I was thinking. I do, however, remember vividly thinking how much those high peaks scared me, and yet how attractive that idea was. That I was kind of petrified by this big landscape. When you stand at the beach and you look out and you see a blank horizon, the potentials of that view still to this day scare the hell out of me, because I'm kind of attracted by finding out what is beyond that horizon or what's beyond that mountain range. To the point where you kind of want to do it and yet you don't as well. That's a very attractive but very scary prospect. And look, I've only really dipped my toes in it a few times where you do pursue that true fear. But I do remember thinking it when I was 19 or 20, seeing the Himalaya, and that did mark a moment in my life where something was happening.
Because I also then within that same conversation, you mentioned about on your 20th birthday, like scaling up the side of Mount Everest to like illegally scaling up the side of Everest. Can you when I heard that, I was like, that is some serious backyard adventure from your tent.
Well, it was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I did. I scampered up Kalapata, which is the it's a bit of a garden route. It's a small bump essentially on the side of the glacier, the Khumbu Glacier, where you can see Everest beautifully, and you see all up through. You see a sort of linearly across to base to Camp 1. You're well above base camp by then, and I kept going, which is essentially is it Pulmoroy? That's the ridge, or Lhotse that goes up the side of it, goes up the sort of towards Tibet and China. I only did it for a few hours, and you're just scampering, and it got a bit icy and a bit hairy, and I didn't have my crampons on. I didn't have an axe with me, and I was bloody cold, and I thought, gee, Beau, one slip here and you whatever. But that few hundred meters extra up the side of Everest was exhilarating, to the point where you lose sight of the summit again. You're sort of in its heart rather than just viewing it from afar. It was good and scary, and I was sick for the next week because of it. I'd pushed a bit high, a bit too soon.
Yeah, right. I mean, and that was solo, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that kind of small experience in itself do you think if you had actually scaled Everest, that would have had obviously scaling Everest would have been pretty drastic, but doing your own solo mission like that and getting your own fear in that sense, I feel like that could almost carry a little bit more meaning than doing this postcard summit photo on Everest.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that was never going to be a mountaineering trip, and what I did was tinkering. It was just nibbling at the edges of this big mountain. But in many respects, that's all I needed. That's all I was willing to give. I was there in an era. This was 2001. This is a few weeks before Y2K was apparently going to close down the technological world. So it was actually in 2000 before 2000. No, 99. Sorry, mate. It was 1999 before it clicked into the millennium, into 2000. Look, it sort of served the purpose of a young man trying to find his edges, and it did it really well. And I've thought about Everest ever since. Would I go up? Could I go up? What would I do to go up? And how would I earn that? I think I'm very much of the school of thought that I'd have to go back and do some hard-nosed mountaineering for 5 or 8 or even 10 years before I'd sign up. And I'd love to do it as a mountaineer and not as a client as such. Kind of feel like you've got to earn your stripes for those sort of high peaks. But anyway, yeah, it was an insight into the adventurous world and something that I just sort of always thought about and not lived.
That's interesting, mate. Like, why do you feel like, I mean, you can just sign up, drop 50K and get yourself up there and get the photo. Like, why do you have to earn your stripes?
Well, I feel like it's overly commodified anyway in the first point. I'm not much into commodified experiences. And because of that, I'm often not a very good instructor. I think I'm a good guide in that I let people find their own pathways, and I just make sure that they do it in somewhat of a safe bandwidth. Whereas an instructor will make them really good to work within that bandwidth, whereas I tend to back off a little and encourage people to find their own way forward, which isn't often encouraged in an educational setting. But yeah, look, I don't know where I get that from. It's a bit of a pride thing as well, I suppose. I don't like the idea of being fraudulent in an area that you think you know quite intimately. So, and look, to be honest, the only reason I was in Nepal was because I'd read about the 96 Everest disaster, which ironically, you know, something that was so inspiring was incredibly tragic. So I was there with sort of trepidation. And it was only in 2002, I think it was, a few years after I'd been there, that they canned all the idea. You can't now do what I did as a 19-year-old without a guide. You've got to do it with a local Nepali or a Sherpa or someone who lives in the Khumbu to take you up there because of tourism and because of safety. And that makes great sense. But I was able to do it as this sort of tourist, or that I could do it by myself. Anyway, yeah, I don't know where the authenticity line can be drawn, Madge, between commodified adventure and searching out your own versions of it. But you know, that is the craft, and that's what I'm trying to search for.
So how do you relate that back to your adventures that you're doing now and being able to broadcast them to a wider audience via YouTube and those mediums? Like, how do you relate that commodifying and adventure in that sense? Or do you not really draw the parallel?
Yeah, I think there's parallels in everything we do, and that's a good one that you've just made. And in many respects too, I doubt if what I'm doing a lot of the time could be even classified as adventure. It's just a dude walking to work or going for a paddle, and he's got enough tools, kit, and knowledge with him to make it very non-adventurous in some ways. I don't know whether you've seen it, and I don't know if you're a God-fearing man, and I like the idea of religion and God, and I'm not necessarily a believer, but there's that series of Jude Law, and I think it's called, what's that called? Anyway, the Jude Law where he plays the Pope. That's right, the young Pope. Now, it's never said, but it's implied through the whole series that he's actually a Pope, and his biggest weakness or his biggest sort of human inkling is that he probably doesn't believe in God, and he's the Pope. And so what makes him such a great Pope, or at least the idea of him being Pope and the story of it, is that he's constantly critical of the very thing that he's there for. And I'm very much the same with my idea of adventure, in that I often don't believe in this genre that I find myself within, which I think is a really good place to be.
Yeah, wow. I constantly find myself mentioning, well, bringing up this thought and conversation of, you know, like, let's take ultra running for an example, because it's a world we both find ourselves in a fair bit. And yeah, quite often I see people in the sport and I'm just blown away by, you know, that person doing 50 kilometers. And, you know, I don't want to sound rude, but like a large part of it's just based on how they look. And I'm like, whoa, like I'm so stoked and blown away that you've just run 50 kilometers. If I walked past you on the street, I wouldn't have picked you to be an ultra runner, you know? And I just think, far out, you know, I spend so much of my time trying to make ultra running as easy as possible. And, you know, and I try to, just continually do that. So it doesn't hurt that much, and it doesn't and so I can get through it with little effort or as much efficiency as possible. And I just think, what is my equivalent of what this person has done? And I just, because I feel like that would be for me, like an adventure, to go and completely change the tide, you know, strap onto, I don't know, like a paddleboard and go out into the sea where it's, you know, something I've just never practiced. Have you like, what would be your equivalent of that?
Well, if ever I'm really curious with a question like that, I try and go and do something that has that in in it. I suppose what I'm not good at, and I've never really tried properly, is, I dabbled in music and languages. They're so disciplined things to do, I think, because they require a lot of sitting. For me, that is not my natural state. Doing my PhD, I was quite proud of myself because I sat for so damn long and got fat for me, or put on weight, which was probably a healthy thing at the time. But yeah, something like languages. But I suppose in a performance perspective, something that's got a bit more oomph to it, being an upfront musician would be a hell of an adventure, to write songs, to perform, to be on stage, to inspire people rather than behind a lens. It takes a long time often for something good to be said through film. I have to take 6 or 8 or 10 takes on the same idea, whereas you don't get that on a stage. You got one crack to inspire folks or to make it sound good, and I like that edginess. So that would be a hell of an adventure, I reckon.
Yeah. Wow, you've just brought a whole level of depth to live performances on stage that I've never really thought about.
It's very ballsy. And yet in saying that, they're so good at it and it's their natural thing, that it becomes like breathing to them, or an artist painting a canvas. They just do their thing. They lock into what they're doing and away they go. Just like you with a cadence out there running, or me paddling or running for that matter. We really trust and back ourselves, and away we go. And it's the easiest thing in the world when we're on song.
Mm. Yeah. And then sometimes it's really not that easy. You feel like a sack.
Mate, I reckon you might have it one day in 10. I reckon I have it 7 days in 10. But they're the ones to be proud of too. That's what makes you a runner or makes you a paddler, is when you go paddling when you feel like crap, because even a bad paddler or a bad runner is still good.
Yeah.
Goes back to the pizza metaphor. And that's what makes you that sort of long range character within that thing. And
what's the pizza metaphor?
Even bad pizza is pretty good, and so even a bad run is still pretty good. You're still happy you did it, or happy you ate that pizza in a sense.
That's
I think it's something like that. It's probably I think there was sex involved there too. Sex and pizza are kind of good. Even when it's bad, it's still okay. So similar.
Oh, I love it. Hey, Beau, the first time I got made aware of you as a person in this sphere, this thing we call the Earth, was actually through a great friend of mine and a student of yours at the time, Buffer, who's actually just become a dad, which is amazing. Big shout out to Buff. You've spent a lot of time in the outdoor education sphere, and you dedicated a lot of time and effort to that world, and no doubt a lot of time and patience and effort to the students that you were able to come across in those times. But that's not the case anymore. Like you're not in that world right now, and it's because of a couple of things that happened through the university you were working at. And I just wanted to ask, when I heard that, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but when I heard that at Monash Uni, when the outdoor education arm of that university was kind of getting collapsed and folded down and tucked away into a cupboard, shut down for lack of a better term, I was pretty heartbroken. I've had some really good friends go through that course, and it's brought a lot of just kind of life and education to my life because of what they've been able to teach me. How does that make you feel? And can you give us a bit of a rundown on that?
Yeah, at the time, and yeah, totally. A big shout to Buff and Liz. If they've just had the little one, that is great. They're both ex-students and friends of mine, and I couldn't think of a better pairing, actually. And what a life they're about to jump into with kids. And there's lots like them too, lots like Liz and Buff, of people that I think of and think of the kind of long range of humans and friendships that I had over that sort of 10 or 12 years, let alone when I was a student. In terms of that course ending, it was probably the only real way I had comfort in it, in a sense that they cut it off at the knees. The meeting I had, which was I was taken into an office, and it all was very unceremoniously cut right there and then. It said outdoor education no longer exists beyond this meeting. That was good and bad in a sense, in that, okay, one, I didn't have a job, but two, at least I wasn't being booted out with something that was going to live beyond me in a very selfish way. So look, I think it was the end of an era because of administration and some of it for the right reasons. It was losing numbers, and it was buried within a architectural structure of a university, which is geared around getting as many people doing the simplest things for the least amount of money. And outdoor education, whichever way you chop it up, is more expensive than studying maths or physics or music, for that matter. You go out and you take a trailer load of canoes, and you use up fuel, and you use up really valuable staff time. Now, we, of course, know that that's all warranted in the long run, and it's good for people and humanity, but it's also too, when you think of someone offsetting their Qantas flight to go overseas, okay, so you spend $1,000 and you jump on a plane and you go somewhere and you have an incredible experience, and then you come home and then you offset your flight. So you think in your mind it's win-win. I've offset my flight and I've had this great experience. You could think of it that if you didn't jump on that plane in the first place and you did something else for an experience that didn't have the carbon footprint, and you still offset the potential of going overseas, it's a triple win in some respects. You have the experience, the world hasn't got CO2 pumped into it, and then you've pumped in oxygen by planting trees. So it's a triple treat as opposed to a double. In some ways, that's what they say at Monash. We've got to come up with, or they had to come up with, better ways for people to be educated without all the expense of running a program. So there is some truth to that you could come up with better ways of outdoor ed. And that's the challenge. Outdoor ed's that's someone else's thing to take now, because I'm no longer in the industry, at least for now. So someone else has to now come up with solutions for reduced fieldwork across the sector. Anyway, that's a real long way to answer your question, Madge. I think it's tragic in some respects, and there's a piece of me that kind of believes it as well.
I feel like it's tragic because who's going to allow people to get outdoors in that academic sense, like and create it into a profession? I just think that in the future, if we start to lose those people and lose that ability to facilitate education outdoors through a program like that, I don't know, I just think like we need more of that in the world, not less.
Oh, I totally agree with you, mate. I think what you'd question though is maybe something like outdoor education or outdoor recreation or the outdoor industry as a body of study, right? Might even be the leisure industry, is probably a misfit for universities, because universities now are geared towards other kind of metrics. The people that work at a university need to produce research, papers, books, interviews. They need to be these so-called thought leaders. Now, it takes an awful lot of time, energy away from all of those metrics when you're off canoeing down a river. So maybe it needs to happen in the TAFE sector, or it needs to be its own institution or its own learning body, but not in a university, which has different KPIs, outcomes, and so-called impact. There's always agitators within that space, and I can talk to those things. And there's lots of counters, but there's bloody counters for everything, right? So I totally agree, Madge, but maybe universities is not the place to push the outdoor learning. Speaking of
guiding, educating, sharing knowledge, I feel like that you've used story a lot in your way of communicating to students, and even like people that you meet, like myself included. I've definitely probably learned a lot from you through for you telling a yarn and telling a story. Is that like, how did that become a way for you to share your knowledge, and how do you premeditate that, or is that just kind of a natural thing?
No, ultimately, I think there's nothing wrong with being selfish when selfishness creates a good atmosphere with you and others. And in many respects, I'm selfish about stories because it's so pleasurable. Sitting around a campfire with a whole bunch of people that you either do or don't know, and raising a good conversation in the whether it be a story or a political viewpoint or who's making the next cup of tea. It's really good and it's great. Think of all of the great times you had at school, and they were often just mucking around with your mates, just shooting the breeze, just talking rubbish in class, probably more than what was going on in the classroom. So really all it is just doing what we like the most. And so I figured if I'm an instructor or a guide or a leader or someone there in charge of a trip, a big formula of that is just having good conversations with people because it's pleasurable. And so if it is pleasurable, why not become good at that very thing that's pleasurable, as well as just doing it because it's, pushing around air, or it's skiving off, or it's procrastinating. You can have impact with something that you're good at and you like. And so it's taken me a long time to figure that out too, that you can actually be good at something that's so everyday, and yet it has some longer term implications.
That's so, yeah, you can have impact by doing something you're good at and you like. It sounds like the perfect little formula for a pretty good day-to-day, pretty good life.
It is, mate. Yeah. You've made a career out of running in a sense, because you're good at it. You love it. You love the thought and the sensation of the wind in your hair and your heart rate at 200 busting up a hill. That's really cool. A lot of people would think this is bullshit. This is hard work, and it's hard. I don't like the feeling of my heart coming out of my chest. And yet you do, and you've been able to formulate that into a sort of a career of sorts, and it's traveled you around the world, and now you're kind of this activist runner dude that's doing what he's good at. So you're doing it too, man. And it's great. It's quite bold too, because you could be earning a lot more money as an engineer.
Yeah, my mother keeps telling me that. That's for sure.
Yeah, there you go.
How have you enjoyed, I guess, with the stories and the channel that you've got, your YouTube channel, the book, with what you're doing, the actions you're doing, how have you tried to relate or not relate the kind of the impact or the activism, how do you communicate your desires to, I guess, work towards a healthier world, if you do at all?
Well, yeah, I have. And I've thought a lot about this in the last few months, Madge, because I've fallen into I think, a bit of a trap of becoming not necessarily righteous, but where my key storytelling revolves around the demise of others around me or humanity. I'm sort of having a dig, and it used to be subtle, but now it's becoming a bit more forthright. And I feel like I've fallen into the trap of that, because all of a sudden my films have got an optimistic angle followed by pessimism, and it's sort of winning out. Pessimism's winning out, and that disappoints me. So I'm going to kind of put my foot off the gas, I think. In fact, I was going to be in a project with you coming up that's probably more forthright and something that I was maybe a little uncomfortable with, because the issues were so big, and yet I wanted to see the goodness in these issues, and I'm not sure I could get to it as well as I wanted to. So I have to go back to being a bit more subtle and a bit more fun-loving, because I think that's a better way to tell stories and to. All right, so here's another way of putting it. You can go and create any film you like in the next year, and it's going to be 10 minutes. What story do you tell, right? Do you go for the throat, and do you go for, I'm going to go for climate change, I'm going to go for the seas rising, I'm going to go for people not being vaccinated, all these big things, and try and get the most impact because they're the biggest problems? Whereas maybe you deal with something as simple as how to grow mint, and the whole 10 minutes is how to grow a really nice bush of mint, and that whole thing becomes a metaphor for the big things rather than it being about the big things. Now, lo and behold, your story about mint has lots of joy in it, lots of, small wins, pleasures, and some setbacks by some weird bug or whatever, or your wife eats too much in a soup one day and you've got to start again. I don't know, but it brings with it all this sort of spectrum of humanity as well. I hope to think that story of mint, as opposed to the big things, has more of an audience and therefore has more of an impact, and you've enjoyed yourself more doing it. That's my aim in life, is to make stories about mint instead of the seas rising.
Yeah. Sorry, but I didn't ask you beforehand. But you just give me a nod or a shake your head. If I mention, are we allowed to touch on McMillan Trail at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's going to come out all going to plan, mate, in about 6 weeks. So
awesome.
Yeah, go away. I ran the McMillan's walking track earlier this year. Took me 2 attempts because the first time totally kicked my ass. But second time, no problem. And I think it's going to be a great story. Because
I've been lucky enough to see the trailer for that, or a version of a trailer that you sent me. And when you did that and I watched it, I was like, you went for the throat. Like, you spoke about the bloody history that trail has created. And you said some pretty strong things, and how you wanted to, to look into that part of history, because that wasn't taught in our school, the bloodshed and the cost of that. Can you speak to that a little bit? Is that and only let go of what you want, don't have to give away the whole film?
No, well, you've nailed it in a sense that the metaphor I talked about with mint and the big issues before, the reason I'm intimidated by these big issues now is because of that film, in a sense, that I went for broke and I went for a run across the mountains to explore an idea and an issue that was much bigger than really I understand and can grapple with.
What is that issue?
And so I'm not quite sure how to tell that story. And it's about basically, the culture I grew up in here in the West Gippsland idealised Angus McMillan, who was one of the early pastoralists, one of the early explorers in the area. He's been, he's got 60 or 70 statues and bronze plaques around the place of where he went and what he did. But it turns out that we now know he's responsible for no less than about 150 bloody and quite full-on massacres of Aboriginal people. And so this is well known now, and this is not my knowledge. This has been brought to my attention by just sort of almost a fluke, because I wanted to run this famous path that he created in the 1860s, and it's a hell of a path. Holy moly! He was a tough bugger, and he went in with a whole bunch of men and created this pathway across these really sort of bloody hard mountain range. It was really tough. So I run this, and I'm trying to explore how and why these histories are very different from when he did it, from what has been told up until now, and now this sort of revelation that there's more to it. I'm also part of it. I've also got Scottish heritage. I live in the lands that he helped clear, or he discovered for others to come and clear. Now, discovered in a white sense, not there's been folks here for tens of thousands of years. But anyway, so I'm trying to explore all this in a 30-minute film, Madge, and my head's going to explode. So I'm really intimidated by that. So I need to pull my foot off the gas and maybe explore smaller metaphors rather than big ones. That's where I'm at, mate. That's kind of where my filmmaking and storytelling is at. To go for less is more,
Well, mate, I so appreciate you having the courage to go out and explore that, especially for just for the people of Australia now and that area, because I feel like those issues are not explored or critiqued that much. And so, yeah, just a huge thanks for having the courage to get out there and do it and work through the process of bringing it to light. Yeah, for you and the crew, like Mitch and that, it's I'm really looking forward to it, because I can't wait to learn a whole lot more that like as you said, that we weren't taught in school. It's kind of been hidden, it's really been hidden in a way, I feel.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Madge. And that's the nice part. The trouble is often you listen to the detractors or the people who think you're a do-gooder, you're a bloody, you're full of shit because these people did these things in a different year and a different time. And there is some truth to that. And we often listen to those detractors. On YouTube, for example, the sort of 97, 98% of people really dig the films that I make, but then I often only ever respond to the 2% who think it's crap or bad or badly told or too ecocentric or too left wing or too whatever. They just think, oh, Beau, you're a dick for some reason, and they're the ones you listen to. So, yeah, it's nice we often forget that you got a lot of allies that you give a damn. You just said thanks for something I haven't even really made yet, and yet I should listen to that more sometimes too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess I'd follow on from that and say, like, and we'll wrap it up pretty soon, mate, because I know you're time conscious right now. Me too. Your time down in the Tarkine this year, down at Takina Trail, you wrote an awesome little piece on that, on the Roaring Journals on the Patagonia website. And it really, how did you enjoy your time down there? Because you in the article, and it was really nice how you tied it back to your relationship with May, your daughter, and how subconsciously maybe that you were brought to a place like that before, and now all these years later you've been brought back and doing the same with your daughter, showing her those places. What did you think of it being down there?
Well, it's so spectacular, and so it's rare to be in forest like that in the first place. And then what you think, then it's even rarer still. You think, how can I be in this modern world with all this knowledge, as in knowledge around me, not just me, and yet we're still taking this forest down when there are alternatives that are probably better and in the long run better financially, let alone just better, better environmentally, socially. And bloody hell, the Lorax is very successful because it's a simple tale about us chopping down the easiest thing that is right in front of us. In any case, it was a really positive experience in the end, because for the first time in my life, I've understood in the most explicit way that our actions impact those that come beyond us. And that's when you're wrapped up in ego without your own child. And I don't think you have to have your own child to make this breakthrough, but May certainly makes it pretty easy when you realize that she's here in 90 years still. And if we go and give her this sense of the forest, and this, if you expose yourself to this incredible forest, and then you contemplate that this forest is not going to be around for your daughter to experience, I got really cross for the first time ever on behalf of my dead self. I got pissed off at the fact that this might be at risk of not being here when I'm not around. And once again, that's as cliche as heck, but that's a very abstract thing to think unless you really think about it. And May makes it very easy to think about those things because your ego continues beyond you through the life of your daughter. So yeah, I get it. And I've never been an activist in my whole life, and yet I kind of got a sense of things down there.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, man. That's amazing to hear from that point of view. And I have no doubt that you'll be able to somehow weave that into your storytelling for many, many years to come. So people can also learn from that, I hope. Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think we'll work together too. These upcoming film projects, if I'm not there full-blooded, I'll be there in some sort of cameo, either physically or mindfully, mate. So good luck with your runs, dude. I hope to run with you soon too. Once I clear up this niggling left leg, I'll put on the long-range shoes again and come try and keep up with you for a stint. So good on you, man. Thanks for having me.
Mate, very much looking forward to that. And thanks again to yourself for your time, and also to your crew for the word that you're putting out there. It's always fun, and it's a great way to learn. Yeah. So thanks so much, Beau.
Enjoy lockdown, mate. Thanks again.
Cheers, bro. Well, there we have it, everyone. A good old yarn with Beau Miles. Now, before I started the conversation, I said I hope this motivates you to start, sit, or listen in conversation. And that I do, but I also hope this conversation motivates you to get out on your own little adventure, wherever it may be, doing whatever you want, because you can really create an adventure out of anything. So, all the best with it. Let us know how you go, and thank you so much again for your time and energy today. I hope you're well until the next time you join in on another conversation. Thank you.